So recently I decided to challenge myself to see how many professional road cyclists I could uncover on Google Street View. At first, this seems like an insane challenge. There are billions of Street View panoramas and obviously much fewer professional cyclists in the world, so the odds aren't in your favour. I got the idea to do this when I was using Street View to explore a road outside the Spanish city of Granada, and first came across 3 quick-step riders, and then, on earlier coverage, many more professional riders, including Olympic gold medalist Samuel Sanchez. Obviously, these riders were training and they weren't racing, but it's worth mentioning the professional cyclists are usually, if not always, contractually obliged to wear their team's kit even when training. That makes them very easy to identify. And most of the time, you can double check that a professional is actually a professional and not just someone else riding the team's kit by checking the bike. So, for example, all 3 of these quick-step riders were riding Specialized bikes, which was the team's bike sponsor for that year. If they weren't riding bikes by Specialized, then you can pretty much discount them being actual quick-step riders and therefore professionals. Now, I actually wasn't looking for pro cyclists when I went on Street View on this stretch of road outside of Granada, but I quickly realised that this wasn't exactly coincidence that I'd seen so many riders on the same stretch of road. Many pros actually come to this area of Spain, the Sierra Nevada, at specific points of the year for altitude training before their major seasonal goals, like the Tour de France, for example. So I began to think about other areas where there might be a high chance of seeing professional cyclists on Street View. For this, the coverage dates were very important. Google drives through different areas at different times of the year. In Sierra Nevada's case, there are a few different coverage dates, but 2 of the coverage dates where I saw a lot of the cyclists were May 2021 and July 2016, which were about a month or so before the Tour de France and Vuelta a España respectively for those 2 years. If Sierra Nevada only had coverage in the autumn or winter months, like in October or February, for example, then you wouldn't be as likely to see so many professional cyclists. So it was important that I didn't just choose the areas where cyclists would live or go to train. I also needed to ensure that those areas coincided with favourable coverage dates. So I already knew I wanted to investigate Sierra Nevada further if I wanted to find more pro cyclists. To scout out some other areas that I could look at, I used a couple of different resources, such as Stravas of certain professional cyclists to determine what times of year they would go to certain areas, and also this site created by the geoguessr player Emily Apocalypse, which show what times of year certain areas have coverage. I first thought about other regions of the world that pros would usually go to do training before specific targets. My first thought here was Tenerife or Tenerife. I had in mind that some pros go there to do their altitude training. Scouting out some Strava rides, I saw that April was quite a popular time to go to Tenerife, but then it didn't appear that there was too much April coverage, or at least April coverage existed, but it didn't seem to be in the areas that cyclists would go to. So I decided to leave Tenerife to one side. Another area I considered was Costa Blanca, or the area around Alicante, Benidorm, Altea, Denia, that sort of area. And the Costa Blanca is actually an area where most teams have their winter training camps. So you'd be looking to see a high population of pro cyclists around the December-January time. When I checked the coverage for this area, there was a huge amount in December and January. So I knew this was an area I had to look at quite a lot. Another couple of areas I wanted to spend some time looking at were Monaco and Andorra, because I knew that a lot of cyclists lived there and trained there, but I didn't have as high hopes for seeing a lot of pro cyclists in these areas because they didn't have the same seasonal peak of pro cyclists like Sierra Nevada or Costa Blanca or even Tenerife. Nevertheless, I still wanted to spend a little bit of time scouting out those areas. So with 4 main areas in mind, I went back to Strava, took a look at some popular training routes and training climbs, and then started clicking down Street View roads to see what I could find. This is how it went. Okay, starting in Sierra Nevada. Let's see what we can find. So for Sierra Nevada, I focused on a few roads that travel up from Granada to Olla de la Mora. Starting out, I had a bit of uncertainty over how well this was actually going to go. Sure, I'd seen a few cyclists already, as I'd outlined in the intro, and actually I later learned that Julian Alaphilippe was on Sierra Nevada Street View. Somehow I didn't pick him up when I was looking, but that's another matter. And nevertheless, I still thought it was possible that I could be clicking for hours and not find anything. So I was happy to see that quite soon after I'd started, I had a couple of findings. I wonder if this is a professional from Euskatel Euskadi. 3 quick step riders here. That is what you like to see. Oh, 2 DSM riders here. So 3 quick step riders, 2 DSM riders, and an Euskartel Euskadi rider. I went into this challenge wanting to identify by name every rider that I came across, but that quickly became a little bit too difficult to do. Obviously, Street View, you just get 1 or 2 images to work from, the faces are blurred, and I don't know the profile of each rider well enough to be able to make an educated guess on who is who. There are certain circumstances where people are more easily identified. For example, current world, continental, and national champions always wear special jerseys that make it clear who they are. Also, former champions have something on their jersey that's a little bit more subtle that can help you figure out who they are. And that was how I was able to identify Samuel Sanchez, because he had these gold bands around his neckline and his sleeves that identified him as an Olympic gold medalist. Without these clues, I was kind of limited to looking through team rosters for that year and also looking through Strava rides. I found some relevant Strava rides that show that Tiege Benoot, Ilan van Wilder, and Thymen Arensman were all training in this area when the coverage was taken, and they were all DSM riders at the time. Obviously, there are only 2 DSM riders here, but it would be interesting if one of them was Thymen Arensman, because just over a year after this coverage was taken, he won a Vuelta stage in this very place. Alongside these pro sightings in the mountains, I found one more closer to Granada. And that was about as far as I got in Sierra Nevada. In total, and this is including the cyclist that I showed in the intro, I saw at least 7 riders riding for world teams and 4 riding for pro teams or pro Conti teams, which is the next level down. I say at least 7 riders because I did see 3 quickstep riders 2 separate times, and I'm not sure if they were the same 3 riders, so I'm not going to double count them for now and we'll leave it at 7. So, a fairly decent starting haul. Now, let's see how Costa Blanca went. I had big expectations for Costa Blanca because so many riders go here in December. And as I mentioned before, there's a lot of December coverage, specifically December 2022. What was really good about this December 2022 coverage is that it's the last coverage date for this area. You can switch to older coverage on Street View, but when you do and you click down the road, Street View usually bounces you between different versions of older coverage, which makes it very difficult to stay on one specific coverage date. That doesn't happen with the latest coverage, or if it does, it happens very rarely. So in Costa Blanca, having the coverage I was most interested in being the latest one was great because I didn't need to keep switching back to that same coverage date every time Street View moved me out of it. I focused on a mountainous area roughly between Denia, Calpe, and Alcoy, and the roads here certainly lived up to my expectations. Here are a few clips. This is looking positive. I think I've seen a few more professionals there from Euskatel. Is that 4 or have there been some duplicates? No, it is actually 3. And the thumbs up to the Street View camera there. Astana riders with a quick step rider. Two Iolo Kometa riders. And there's a Caharoral rider here. I was already pretty happy with how everything was turning out. And then, just after seeing a solitary quick-step rider, I came across this. There is actually an off-road. Oh, look at this. Look at this. And we have the whole quick-step team. So, yeah, really nice finding. 9 quick-step riders I count in this group. 3 of them are fairly easily identified because they have the world or national champion tell that I talked about during the Sierra Nevada section. They are Remco Evenepoel, the current world champion as of the coverage date, and former world champion Julian Alaphilippe alongside former Danish national champion Kasper Asgreen. I believe I managed to find this ride on Remco Evenepoel's Strava, and from that I could see a few other riders who are in the group as well, including Andrea Baggioli, Ilan van Wilder, and Louis Vaca, all riding for Quickstep. There was another rider, Yuri Sharper, whose name I didn't recognise. I assume that was one of these 2 riders near the front who didn't have Quickstep jerseys on. Interestingly enough, while I've been making this video, Sharper's actually been signed to Quickstep's development team for 2025. So who knows, maybe he'll be riding with the seniors in a couple of years' time. So Costa Blanca was a big success. Among the world teams, I saw 11 quick-step riders, including 9 in that big group with Evenepoel, Alaphilippe, and Askren. 2 Astana riders, and then for the pro teams, 3 Euskotelu Skadi riders, 2 Caja riders, and 2 Yolo Kometa riders. I'll give an honourable mention to this Cofidis women's rider. The Cofidis women's team were actually a continental team when this coverage was taken, but since then have graduated to pro team status. So I decided to group Andorra and Monaco together because, spoiler alert, I didn't see that much in these areas. And that's fine. I still thought these areas were worth checking because there are a lot of cyclists that live here. But of course, throughout the year, they're doing their race schedules. They're not going to be training near their home. And in any given snapshot throughout the year, there's just less likelihood of coming across riders than there are in areas like the last 2, where a lot of teams go at certain points in the year. Andorra was a complete dud. There are only 2 coverage dates here, and the most recent of those is over 10 years old. Plus, they're not in the ideal seasons for finding cyclists. After half an hour of searching, all I really had to show for it were a couple of amateur cyclists, so I moved on fairly swiftly from Andorra. Monaco was a bit more interesting. Just a quick note, when I say Monaco, I really mean it as shorthand for this southeastern area of France near Monaco and Nice. I think someone with a lot of patience could actually find quite a lot here. There's loads of different coverage and there's a lot of different roads as well to look through. But at this point, I was starting to lose a little bit of patience, so I didn't want to spend too long. However, I did look at a few roads. Starting out, I could see this was an area where cycling was quite popular, and that makes sense. Other than it being an area where a lot of cyclists live and train throughout the year, it's also where one of the most important 1 week stage races, Paris Nice, finishes. And it's the area where the last Tour de France finished, the first time in its history it had finished outside of Paris. Despite all that, pro riders were still eluding me until one of the last roads I decided to check produced this. An Ineos rider, and the rainbow bands on the sleeves and shorts confirm that this is a former world champion. Initially, my thoughts turned to Michał Kwiatkowski, who was world champion in 2014, but then I noticed the hair, which confirms this is Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, who, by coincidence, also became road world champion in 2014. So I was really happy with this finding, particularly when I thought that I wasn't even going to see anyone in this area. Well, when I've been doing this, I've mostly been focused on world team and pro team riders in road cycling. Ferrand Prévot's a little bit different to all of the other riders I've seen. She actually hasn't regularly competed in road races since 2018, and this coverage is from 2023. However, I still want to include her here because she is a former road race world champion, and besides, she's been world champion in so many different disciplines, and even recently got an Olympic gold medal in cross country mountain biking. So, just the one finding from Monaco and Andorra, but it is a big one. I came into this wanting to find as many pro cyclists as I could, and I think it turned out pretty well. For a few hours' work, I saw roughly 30 cyclists, depending on how you want to count them. And among those 30 or so, of course, were cyclists performing at the very highest level. Seeing how I've managed to see so many pros in such a small amount of time, it makes me realise that there must be tens, if not hundreds, more cyclists ready to be discovered on Street View. I'm sure someone with more patience than I've had could cast their net more widely, even in the areas that I've already looked, and find lots more. Even on the rows that I think I did look through quite thoroughly, I didn't tend to switch between coverage dates too much, so I'm sure there's a lot more waiting to be found on older coverage. And beyond that, I'm certain that there are areas, besides the ones that I've mentioned in this video, that could be worth looking through. After I'd started to edit this video, I noticed that the town of Livigno, which is close to the Stelvio Pass in Italy, was also quite a popular training area. After about 10 minutes of searching there, I'd already had quite a few findings. One country I haven't talked about at all in this video is Belgium, obviously a country with a lot of cycling prestige. Even though a lot of riders do train there, I decided to avoid looking at Belgium because, as far as I could tell, there was no obvious starting point to look, and I wasn't about to look through the whole country. There must be riders captured on Street View here, though. In fact, Tom Bonen, with a few of his riding partners, was caught by the Street View car in 2009. I think there's a good chance that someone with a bit of know how and patience could find even more cyclists on Belgian Street View. In any case, hopefully this video was interesting and it gave a bit of insight into my thought processes. If you do give it a go yourself, I'll be interested to hear what you find. Until then, thank you for watching.